assembled this talk originally for the New York City Code Camp, and I was like, you know, I'm interested in it, but I really didn't know what the end result of the talk was going to be. I just kind of threw the abstract out there, and you know, and what I found out at the end of it all was this stuff is really, really easy, which is really powerful in a sense, because as a developer, you can concentrate on developing your great software rather than having to manage all your infrastructure, all your GUI, all the stuff you don't really care about. You just want it to work at the end of the day. And there's a lot of great online services that have kind of just taken care of a lot of that, you know, just pain and lifting and all of that for you. So, and I'll prove it to you. So this is this entire talk is basically a really big demo where we take a Node.js application, we deploy it to Travis CI, or have it build in Travis CI, if you will, and then we publish it up to Heroku. So it's just a simple Node.js web application. If you're not familiar with Node.js, it's JavaScript on the server. So I'll basically have something that will basically display hello world on the screen. You know, a very simple thing, but it's JavaScript on the server that's doing that. But it's kind of, that's not really the point of the talk. That's kind of what is being used here, but don't get, you know, hung up. If you're doing Python development or something like that, maybe there's a really great story for you as well. So we get started on this. So it kind of breaks down into 3 distinct points. I kind of have, you know, create, build, and then publish. So first we need to actually create a web application. So we're just gonna go and create something new. So like all great web applications, they all start by creating a folder that's going to have a GitHub repository. So I'm just going to call this Node.js. Can you guys see that in the back? Is that cool? A little bit. Let me bump the font size a tiny bit. We'll see if 24 is completely insane. Better. All right. So first great step in all of software is creating the directory where you're going to put your stuff. So we're going to do Node.js, and we'll just do Cloud CI PHL. Because we're in Philly, so we'll do that. I don't know why making the directory is taking that entirely long. So I'll just pop into this new directory that I just created. So right now, I got a completely empty folder. I have some stuff pre-prepared that I'm just gonna copy into that folder. I'll explain it once it's in there. So right now, I have a folder full of some different files. So the Node.js application is here, is this web.js. If we look at that for you Node people in the audience, it's basically just running hello world to the screen. Not super impressive, you know, not something to get hung up in terms of the demo. So now that we've added our files that we need, also a note for the NPM people, I'm kind of shortcutting the whole NPM install in terms of time, so I already have the Node modules folder sitting there ready to go, so if you're wondering where did that step go, I took care of that already. So,
are you going to show package.js?
No, I'm not showing any packaging or NPM or anything like that. It's just the cloud storage in terms of how that works. So we will do git init to create a new GitHub repository, or Git repository, rather. And we need to add those files that I just put in this folder. And we'll just call it initial commit. If you're not super familiar with GitHub, you know, and Git, you can figure out a lot of this stuff, but just try to stay within here. So I created this Node.js Cloud CI PHL. I'm going to go create something that matches this on GitHub's website. So GitHub is kind of the main place where developers seem to congregate these days for open source software. My team at work uses it for private repositories as well. Like, that's pretty much where I do all of my development, storage, and collaboration in terms of source code. So I think a lot of other people do that as well. So we pop the repository name in here. Wow, my machine is running incredibly slow. So just creating a new GitHub repository. So I've got a GitHub repository, but it's got no code in it at this point. So we need to take the code that we've created locally and we need to push it up into GitHub. So I'm just going to copy and paste some lovely commands they provided. And you can read this, and do exactly what they're telling you to do. In the interest of time, we will just paste this in here once I can figure out why the paste is not cooperating. This is literally pasted in a dash character. There we go. So now I have my Git remote, and I can push my code up.
So you can tell that they actually showed you the instructions when you created a computer. They tell you exactly what to do.
Yeah, they literally tell you exactly what to do on GitHub whenever you create a new repository. So if you've already created something at the command line, hey, here's what you need to do to get everything up there and going. So it's kind of handy. So at this point, I push the code. So if I refresh this page, wait for it, we've got code. So that's kind of, in terms of the talk and demo here, this is the step one. We've successfully created a really, really simple web application. Nothing too fancy, doesn't do a whole lot, but this is where the fun part starts. So build. So we have our application up in the web, up in the cloud on GitHub, but we want something to build our code ourselves. Over here I can do, what is it, npm test. Hopefully this will work. Yeah, so I can run my tests locally, but I want the software, to run npm install and run my tests and stuff. I want the cloud to handle that for me. So to get that going, we use Travis CI in terms of this demo. There's all sorts of different online services. I'm familiar with Travis CI in terms of using Node.js. It seems like a really good experience for Node developers. It's free for public. You need to have private repositories. That's kind of where they're making their money. And I'm assuming that's how they're able to keep the public stuff free. So that's cool. So you normally would have to log in, get an account. I'm sure you're all more than capable of doing that, so we won't go through the whole login process. But the interesting thing is, after you're here, you'll see this lovely plus button over here on the left. So if I can zoom in, So if we hit this plus button, that brings us to being able to add a new repo. So this is displaying a full list of everything that's on my GitHub right now. And you can see that it's last synced 3 hours ago. This is kind of a gotcha if you're doing all this stuff real fast and you come here and then you're like, where's my repository that I just created? You need to click the sync button here at the top, and then it'll say syncing from GitHub. So that might save you at least 5 minutes of aggravation down the road. So if we scroll the whole way down here in my lovely list of things, we see Kendale IV, which is my account, and then this Node.js Cloud CI PHL that we just created. So enabling it is literally as simple as, wait for it, that. It's done. I didn't have to go to GitHub and set up a webhook. I don't need to know about the HTTP communication that may or may not take place behind the backend. I don't even know if it does HTTP. For all I know, it does TCP over UDP, which I don't even know if it's even possible. But the point is, you don't need to understand what's going on. You just stand on the shoulders of giants. They've already built all of this integration stuff for you, and it's amazing. So we pop back over to the main Travis CI page. So this is where things, things do take time sometimes in terms of building the stuff. And the one gotcha here is because I've wired it up, you also need to then push code up to GitHub in order for Travis CI to start building it. So if you wire it up and you're like, why is nothing happening? I just told you to start building my code and you're not building my code. The reason being that you need to actually make a change in your source code and then it will pick up on that next change. Which I actually made that mistake the last time I did this talk. I was kind of embarrassing. So let's make a simple change. Add an editor. And naturally I'm up here, so my machine's gonna run super slow. So I'm just gonna come in and put a silly Really, Adam? There we go. So I'm just putting a simple space in. I'm just making a change. Doesn't matter what I did. Change code. Oh. Don't worry, I know how to get it. Cool. There we go. So now, if we look on GitHub, we see this change code commit is now the latest thing. You know, it was authored just now, which I'll spare you the Spaceballs joke about the just now there. And we are now in a holding pattern waiting for Travis CI to figure out that, all right, that was quick. So it found our change code and it failed to build. And why did it fail to build? It's looking for this .travis.yaml file. So Travis as a web application itself, it doesn't have a lot of configuration on its own website, which I think is the right way to do things. I've used, some other tools where there's all sorts of point and click stuff, but it all lives kind of in this web interface versus, so it lives in this web interface rather than having the, configuration actually as part of your code. So we're going to go add that file necessary to make this work, and it will stop failing. The reason it's actually failing is if it doesn't detect one of those files, it just makes the assumption that you're coding Ruby, which I don't know how we all feel about that, being at the JavaScript event, but that's, it ran Rake and Gem and all RVM shenanigans. So let's go grab that file that we need, which I believe is on my desktop. So just copy over this Travis file, and we'll take a peek at it then. I omitted the fact that I need bureau facts. Pay no attention to the man behind it. Alright, so let me figure out the Zoom situation. Why are we not working? There we go. So this is the entire Travis configuration in order to tell it to work with a Node.js application. Line 1 is, you basically tell it, Node.js. That's it. And it takes care of the rest. You can also specify the versions that you want it to build with Node.js. I have it building on 4 different versions. I don't know what running multiple versions of Node or an NPM and all that stuff locally, I don't know what that story looks like, but I'm assuming their story is potentially a lot less painful if you want to be able to support multiple versions, or even just have it running just knowing that you are still having backwards compatibility, if you're running a library or something like that. So you can get all of these for free. They all run in parallel. There's no reason to avoid, building with multiple versions there. And you can also specify things you want to have happen beforehand. I have some basic tests. And by tests, I mean test, and by tests, I mean, wait for it. I'm expecting true to be true. If this test ever fails, just run terror, because I don't even know what's happening anymore. So, but this is necessary in order to get the Jasmine test runner to work. It might work on your machine, but you probably have it installed globally, and then when it gets to Travis probably doesn't have it installed globally, so you just need to give it that little extra bit of instruction to say, hey, you need to do this kind of stuff that I've already done on my developer machine, but it's just not tracked anywhere. Well, this is where you need to track it, because otherwise things might just blow up on you. Which we already saw with the Travis YAML file being missing. You'll get some similar problems. So we add that. Let me unmagnify myself here. Pop back in. So we have a new file. So we will add that. I'll just say add Travis CI configuration. Push this up to GitHub. And now we're in another waiting holding pattern. So at some point, it'll go through the Travis queue, and they'll decide to start building your software. And that was quick, which is great, because I didn't bring any musical instruments to entertain anybody today, so I'm glad there's not a whole lot of balls in the action here. So what's cool is you can actually watch it build too, which it actually finished before we were able to really get in there and dig in. you can actually see, zoom there. So you can actually see exactly what's being executed from the command line on the Travis server. So the same thing you'd be running on your own machine. You can run it in the cloud, but you can run it in the cloud without this fear of it being like this thing that you can't touch or interact with, or be able to see the logs, or be able to see what even happened as a result of, trying to build it, your software. So it wraps it up all nice. So you've got these little expandy things here, so you can see what happened when npm install ran. You can see that I, told it to globally install Jasmine Node as part of the build. That's great. And there were no test failures, so the whole thing did well now. And that's cool, but we've also built it in 3 other versions at the same time. So we support .11, .10, .8, and .6, and I don't even know what the latest current version is. So, yeah, so at this point, we have, our software being built by Travis CI, and that's, it's kind of it for that step. And kind of the last step here is publish. It's not destroy, it's actually publish. So now we want to be able to take our code and actually push it up somewhere. If you remember back, it was a real simple web application that just printed hello world onto the screen. But right now we kind of don't have it hosted anywhere, so it's not really available on the web at the moment. So that's kind of our next step where we want to go. And this part is pretty cool as well, as easy as it is. So I've already installed this thing called the Heroku tool belt on my machine. I don't think it's a Ruby gem. I think you actually just download it from the website. I don't know what the Mac story looks like because I'm a Windows guy, but they have an installer for Windows. Just go look it up. But whenever you have this installed, you can do all sorts of fun things like literally just typing Heroku create, and it spins up a new Heroku application. That's all it takes from the command line. So, and it's fun because it gives you these random names. So we got Boiling Hallows 79 or 7809, so that's kind of fun. But you can go at this point over to Heroku's website. If I hit refresh, you can see this, new website's created here. I want to rename it so it's not Boiling Hallows because I don't know if that's creepy or not, but we just don't want that. We want it to match. You can either do this through the Heroku interface, the actual web app, or you can just do it right from the command line. So there's the Heroku apps, rename, Node.js, Cloud, CI, PHL. I'm just naming it the same as the project itself and the GitHub thing, just keeping everything the same so there's no confusion, but there's no reason you couldn't name it something differently. So I execute that command. At this point, it's going out to Heroku, doing the rename, they're doing all their magic, all their wire up, all that fun stuff. And for you Git people in the audience, it also added a Heroku remote for you. So if I do git remote-v, it added a Heroku remote. For the purposes of this demo, I don't want to push the code directly from my machine, but I could do that with this, and that would totally be fine. But I kind of prefer to have the build server kind of handle that, and the build server in this case being Travis CI. So having that, manage the deployments, being the thing that gates, if a test failure happens, that you're not going to go ahead and proceed with your deployment. It's just better to let the build server manage that. Even if you're a one-person team, at the end of the day, it's just a better plan. So we need one file we have to put in here for Heroku to be happy. And it's something you probably just find on the Heroku documentation. They've got this thing called a proc file. And I'll show you what that looks like. Stay with me because this file is really complex. It's that single line there. So you're basically telling Heroku that you want to run a Node application, and this is the main entry point. So if you like calling your stuff main.js, or I don't even know what .js, you just need to fill that in here. But that's just the basic instructions for Heroku, that it needs to know where your starting point is and how to run your software. So we need to push that up. So add that new file. I'll just say add Heroku configuration. and push that up to GitHub. All right, so now we're in another holding pattern, which these holding patterns thus far have been treating me very nicely. So we're now waiting for it to pick up yet another change to our GitHub repository.
How did it know to pick up from the GitHub repository?
So the question is, how did it know to pick up from the GitHub repository? Earlier on, I went into this add here, and I scrolled way down, and I just flicked a switch. Like, it's that.
But you'd already configured Travis to look at your GitHub account, or what?
Yeah, so I previously signed in with Travis CI and linked it up with my GitHub account. That's how that integration is happening. But, I mean, it's just using a web application, so you guys can probably, get in and get logged in with Travis CI and get that stuff set up on your GitHub account. So have we completed? We have. So the last thing that was executed here was the add Heroku configuration. And if we look at the latest version here, kind of see what happened. So it ran npm install, installed Jasmine, ran our very exhaustive test suite of asserting true is true. And I'm not sure where the deployment is. That's odd. Should be there. Oh, I know what I'm missing. Mistake on my part. So, I mentioned the Heroku tool belt, but there's also another command line tool that Travis itself provides called, I don't know what they call it, but it's a Ruby gem. So if you got Ruby running on your machine, if not, just get Ruby running in whatever environment. If you've got Windows, have a good time. But if you have Windows and you're having problems with this, seriously, just tweet me. Like I think I figured out the solution for it. So if you do gem install Travis, you'll have this functionality available. But we'll just do Travis setup Heroku. So this is now executing some Ruby code. Question?
I just want to know, if you're not able to get Ruby installed or any of that, it's basically just updating the config. And it has an interface to do all the things on the website, build that string and all those. So you don't even need the Heroku or the Travis command and the comments. You can just install it.
Yeah, and just to repeat for everyone, and Tendy's bringing up the point that you don't really need this tool, and that's correct in as far as the one thing this tool does provide is it does the encrypted API key. I don't know how that stuff works. You might be able to do it manually, but I don't know how that would work exactly. I don't want to figure out how they do their encryption. It seems to just work because at the end of the day, it's a public repo and it's going to have my Heroku API key up there, so I can't just put that in plain text. So you'll see that, but a lot of this is just pounding the enter button, so it's asking, did it detect your GitHub repository correctly? Yes, it did. So now I need my Heroku API token, which I have right there. So where you find your Heroku API token, now that I've faked you all out and you didn't manage to get it with my token, so you can ruin my presentation before the end. So you go into your user here, you go to manage account, and if you scroll the whole way down here, you see show API key. When you click show API key, it's going to ask you for your password. After you enter your correct password, it will show you your API key. That's kind of your secret key with Heroku. You don't want to put it on the internet or share it with anybody that you don't trust because it gives, I believe, unfettered access to your Heroku account. So it's kind of terrifying if it's just sitting out on the internet in plain text. So I pasted that in very quickly. So Heroku application name, we'll just go with it. Deploy only from my repository, yes. Encrypt the API key, so this is where you need to make the correct decision. If it's a public repository, you need to encrypt your API key, otherwise, I've never done a test to see how fast you might get hacked, but that could be a fun Saturday project sometime, but I don't recommend it for anybody who uses the Heroku account for anything serious. So we're gonna do that encrypt API key. So if we do a git diff, we can see what it generated. Kind of weird line wrap there. So it generated this deploy, provider Heroku, API key, secure, and this is the big long mess of a secure API key. I don't know how to do encryption by hand, nor do I want to learn at this point in time. So I'm just going to rely on the fact that they've done it right and just offload that to them. So, you know, aside from this API key, the rest of this stuff you could have just done manually by hand, but I think it's worth it just to have the API encryption to be able to use that tool. Because otherwise you got to figure that out, and I just don't really want to figure it out. So, we just want to add that new file. And before I said add Heroku configuration or something, which I didn't really do it, so this time we'll do really add Heroku configuration for reals. So push that up to GitHub. And we're in the holding pattern here, which has been kind to me thus far, which is fabulous. So we're really adding our Heroku configuration this time. So let's see if we can catch one of these builds in action. And so we can actually see it. Oh, tests ran. Doing deployment things, Heroku, creating, triggering, uploading, shenanigans. Waiting for it. Installing your node modules. Because at the end of the day, even though it built everything on Travis CI, when you deploy it to Heroku, I assume they're building everything up as well. So it's kind of, it's just showing the communication of what's going on as Heroku's taking care of their end. So, it says we're done. It says deploying application. It didn't explode, so I'm assuming it's there ready to go. It gives you the URL right here. But we can also come over here to Heroku, and if I do the old F5 refresh, you see this Node.js Cloud CI PHL, which is what we've been creating. I go to the lovely triple dots. I don't know what do you call that menu? Like they have the hamburger menu. It's like the triple lines. I don't know. Is that like the meatball menu or something like that? Is that what it's called? So you go to that menu, and if you go to Open App, it worked. So we now have a working web application that, you know, is of the utmost value to humanity here. So we learned it, you know, hello world to the screen. So like, that's cool. So that's pretty much, you know, the crux of the demo is, you know, just standing up here, I was able to create, build, and publish software, you know, rather quickly, easily, and I didn't have to get down in the weeds of a lot of infrastructure review and knowing how to provision my virtual machines, you know, making these decisions about which Linux stack I want to run on top of and all that stuff. Like, it's just handled for you by the cloud, so that's pretty cool. So we can also take this step further because naturally we're all about like fashion and flair around here, of course. So now we can do some cool stuff with our GitHub repo. So a lot of people like to have the status of their build actually as part of their GitHub repo. So this is, you know, our simple GitHub repo that we've been working with this entire time. But you can actually add this lovely image here that says build passing, which is fabulous because it's not failing. If you click on that image, they give you an image URL that you can use. So just to demonstrate, if I pop that image URL in a browser, I get an SVG image, which means, you know, scalable vector graphics, you know, so you can make it bigger, smaller, it doesn't get all fuzzy on you. So we've got that image that we can now, you know, use to indicate the status of our build. And it looks like you can even pass in the different branches. So right here, it's doing master. You know, if you've got, you know, some isolated development branch, if you like working that way, you know, as a dev branch, you know, you can have them both, you know, show both their statuses. So what that looks like, we'll just do it right on GitHub on the fly, because why not? So I'm just literally editing a markdown file on GitHub. It's the README markdown. If you're not familiar with how that works on GitHub, your README markdown file is the file that gets presented right below your code. So if you have the README markdown file, it's kind of like the, hey, this is my stuff, and, you know, a little explanation as to what's going on. So we can add that image here by doing a little bit of markdown. So we could say Travis CI master build status. This would be like the hover text on the image, and then this would be the image. It's just Markdown. GitHub has GitHub flavored Markdown. They've got help for that kind of stuff if you're having trouble figuring out the image. So we'll just add Travis CI build indicator. So commit directly to the master branch. Feel dirty already. Alright. So yeah, so that's cool. So when we scroll down here, we can see, hey, our build's passing. So anybody that comes to our open source project, that can immediately raise their confidence, the fact that they see that your build is passing and it's not failing, because that would be the opposite of passing. So, moving on. Another point in terms of Travis CI is you can have it build everything. So I had 4 different versions of Node.js running. Like, why not? Like, it's not my VM, it's not my CPU, it's not my electricity, it's not my carbon count or whatever. Like, it's a free service, like, take advantage of it. So if you have branches, you know, that are different, if you have pull requests, like, just build everything, because why not? So what it looks like in terms of building a pull request. So I'm gonna make a really simple pull request. See if we can do this right from the GitHub editor. Test. I think we can do this from here now. Compose file change. Cool. So now if we go back to my repo, oh, it didn't actually open it. I guess I gotta put something. Create pull request. There we go. So if you've worked with GitHub before and you're familiar with the concept of a pull request, it's basically, here's something that I'm kind of requesting that you pull in, you know, into the project. So if you're making a change to like Reveal.js, which is what my slides are in, if you wanted, you know, additional functionality potentially to get added to their library, you might submit them a pull request and say, hey, like, here's some cool stuff I've done. Like, if you're interested, like, you're more than welcome to, you know, merge that into your project. So that's kind of the real quick and dirty on what a pull request is. But we can have GitHub build all of these. So it's showing you all sorts of fun stuff. And all as well to successful checks. So, and the way pull requests work is if you have 8 open pull requests and one of them gets merged, well, now all 7 that are left, they need to be rebuilt. It takes care of that for you. So, you know, you don't have to spend the time of pulling it down, doing the weird merging and whatnot, trying to figure it out, making sure that it's still okay to merge. You can just rely on Travis CI to pick up on the fact that, hey, you know, code changed. You know, I need to rebuild these 7 things. It's not your, you know, it's not your CPU time. You don't have to remember to do it. Just rebuild everything as necessary, right on GitHub, which actually works really well in a team environment.
Do you have to configure Travis to do that?
Travis, by default, is configured to build your pull requests. You can turn it off. So if we go into settings here, settings and then settings, that's kind of hilarious. So you can turn off build pull requests. I don't see a reason to turn it off, but if you ever wanted to turn it off, there's the setting to do it. All right, so we got, you know, we're building pull requests, build all the things. You know, if I had the one place to put that all the things image, like this would be it, you know, just build everything. So Travis CI has a lot of different deployment options and a lot of different languages. So if you are not a JavaScript developer, like honestly, like I write a lot more .NET at this point in time than I do JavaScript. But you know, they support C#, which is kind of interesting of how they do it. But they've got all sorts of different languages here. You know, you can write everything from Erlang to Haskell to PHP to Perl, Objective-C, Java, Visual Basic. I'm so sorry. I'm joking. Go, but they've got all sorts of different, you know, languages supported. So, you know, if you learn how to use Travis CI, then you can then ideally apply it to a bunch of your different stacks and frameworks. You know, if you have something you like to do on the side as a hobby, and you want to use this at work, like maybe you can, use the same thing in both places, and you really know what you're doing in terms of both of those. And they've also got a number of places you can deploy to. I deployed to Heroku today, but there is a list. I tried to zoom more, and that's not going so well. So they've got everything from AppFog to GitHub releases, Google, what is it? Google Cloud Storage, Ruby gems. So I'm assuming if you were creating some sort of gem put up on the Ruby gems, you can have it manage that for you. Node.jitsu. There's all sorts of things they support. One thing they don't support yet that I haven't seen is Azure Web Sites. I'd like to see that at some point. I don't know if they accept contributions. I mean, you can do a custom deployment, but I'd just like to see it built in that you can just ship a Node.js app or a .NET application up to the cloud in terms of that. So back here. So if you are having problems with your Travis CI configuration, you can't figure out what is the problem with it, they have a linter tool, so you can either just lint.travisci or lint.travis-ci.org. You can probably just search for Travis CI lint or linter or something from Google there. But you basically pump in either your GitHub repository, or you just paste in the actual file, and it'll just go through and validate. So if I were to Node.js, what do I call this thing? Cloud CI PHL. If I pop that in there, wait for it. Should say everything's good and everything's valid. So if you're having any problems, that can help you identify what might be wrong with your configuration. And so I have a whole section of this talk on .NET or the JavaScript conference, so I'm going to skip over it. But if you're interested in that kind of stuff, just see me at the party or after or something. I'd love to talk to you about it. But we'll skip over all that stuff. And how are we doing on time? Because we started late, so do we want to...
We are running at 7 more minutes.
Okay. So, let me think. Okay. So I'm going to show you this real fast. So we showed that build status image, but if you go to shields.io, it's a website that has all sorts of those badges. So if you want to go completely crazy and like impress all your friends with your various counts of all your things, like if you want to have code coverage, if you want to have this, that, and the other thing, the number of downloads of your Ruby gem, the number of downloads of your GitHub release, Chocolatey installs, which is kind of a Windows thing, or is a Windows thing. There's all sorts of fun stuff here. So if you're looking for something, that you might want to add, just check out shields.io. Hopefully it'll be there for you, already pre-written, and you just be able to use it and be good to go. So yeah, so I guess I'll just wrap it up and then we'll do questions, but just remember, like, a lot of the stuff is easy, and that's totally awesome. Like, that's kind of the point of the talk, is you don't need to know a lot of what's going on behind the scenes. Like, I don't know how Travis and, Heroku are interacting. I don't know how GitHub and Travis are interacting. They just kind of handle all that integration themselves, and that's totally awesome. But if you do run into some difficulty, like, don't get discouraged. Sometimes this stuff is, kind of tricky. Like, you miss that one critical step, and if you don't know, if you haven't done the process enough times, and if you're not familiar with the ecosystem, you might have a difficult time just tracking that down. I've made mistakes just doing this talk, so don't get too hung up on it. So, and at this point, I'll just open it up for questions. You can always ping me on Twitter as well. It's @KindaleIV.
And can you talk at all about how you do ignore certain files? So, for example, you change the readme, right? I imagine you don't want to build on changing the readme.
Yeah, the question is, do you want to, like, how would you ignore certain files? Like, if you don't want to build, if you change the readme markdown, just build everything is my advice. Like, there's no reason not to. So, you're not paying for the CPU time and all that. And even if there was, I'm not aware of a way to tell it when to build and when not to build. But it's almost more work trying to think about how you would even handle that logic. So I'd rather just build everything.
Just on top of that, you can target like permissions branches, not specific files. With Travis, you can say, use this branch. So if you're on GitHub, you've got GitHub pages, you don't want to make tests to GitHub pages.
Yeah, the question was kind of around this whole notion of being able to configure Travis CI to be able to ignore certain branches. I'm assuming in their configuration you can probably tell it what branches to ignore. I'd have to double check to be certain, but I'm assuming there's some sort of like, hey, I want to build this but not this, but it's probably at the branch level. It's probably not at like a commit or a file level. I'm assuming is how that works. Yes?
The general big picture is triangle with GitHub, Travis, and are there other corners that are possible, like Amazon Web Services?
Oh yeah, so the question is if we're kind of taking this three-tiered approach. You know, we've got GitHub, we've got Travis CI, and we've got Heroku, you know, each serving their respective task, but a lot of the pieces, you can just swap them out. So instead of Travis CI, there might be other online services you could use, and Travis CI has this list of places you can deploy to. So instead of using Heroku, perhaps we could have pushed our application up to Node.jitsu or AWS Code Deploy. I don't know if they support Node. But yeah, you can switch out a lot of these pieces. The one thing that you probably won't be able to switch out would be GitHub, because that's where a lot of that integration is happening in terms of Travis CI. And I don't know, I mean, you might be able to use Bitbucket, but it might be touch and go, but there's not going to be a ton of online code places, you know, where people collaborate on open source code that's going to have a lot of those integrations wired up, I assume. But maybe you could switch out the GitHub piece, but yeah, don't get too hung up on like, you know, you must go from A to B to C because that's what I did. Like maybe you find something better, you know, that you don't want to use Heroku for X, Y, and Z reasons, but you know, if it's just as easy to deploy something to Node.jitsu, go for it. It's an excellent point. Yes.
So to reproduce what you did in this demo, how much would it cost?
So the question is around cost for the demo itself. This demo hasn't costed me anything yet.
So you're still using a private GitHub, right?
No, this code, you can actually go up and look at this code right now. I did not make a private GitHub repository for it. I made a public one. So
it's totally free?
Yeah, you can go do this demo and there will be no cost to you incurred.
But I mean, like, you didn't pay me to use Travis, you didn't pay me to use Heroku, you didn't use
No. Yep, yeah, there was no cost. You will run into costs once you hit private. Once you start making your repos non-public and you start making them private, that's when you start incurring costs, because Travis CI is going to make you pay for Travis Pro in order to build that stuff, and GitHub itself is going to require that you pay them in order to have, you know, a certain number of private repositories. But if you're doing everything in the public and that's cool for you, like, there shouldn't be any cost incurred to you. If you start scaling stuff up in Heroku and you start making changes here, this is where you could end up costing yourself. I don't know if they prompt you to say, hey, you're going outside the free tier, or what that story looks like, but just be kind of aware as you're monkeying around with things. If you tell it from the command line, like, hey, I want it to run 8 dynos or something like that, like, yeah, you might incur a rather substantial cost, and it might not warn you from the command line. So I guess just know what you're doing, especially with Heroku, like if you're changing settings, if you're concerned about, you know, potential cost. Because I wouldn't want to see somebody do this demo, let it sit for a week, and then get a bill at the end of the month for like $1,200 or something crazy. Like don't come knocking on my door, because that's kind of steep there. But yeah, I think we're about, you know, done here. So if you have any other questions, feel free to tweet me or just see me around. I'll be here and there. So thank you all for coming.